On this Saturday night, the window to get Canadians home is closing. The Prime Minister's plan to work with the airlines.
We won't be able to reach everyone.
Is the next step restricting travel within Canada? The border closed.
That kind of shut off a lifeline for all of us.
Global News reports on the impact in the U.S. and here at home. New York's cases spike, while millions of Americans are forced into lockdown. Plus, Italy's COVID-19 death toll rises as other parts of Europe brace for the worst.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. We have the latest developments on the COVID-19 crisis. The Northwest Territories reported its first case. Now parts of Canada are looking at restricting their borders inside the country, like the Northwest Territories, which is prohibiting most travel into that part of the country. Today, the health minister warned Canadians their efforts to stop community transmission of the new coronavirus will need to continue for some time yet.
I understand that people are frustrated and they're at home and they're not doing things that they normally do and they're not seeing their loved ones. But now is the time to double down, actually, because 1 week is not enough. We will be in this situation for a while. And I think Canadians need to understand this isn't about 2 weeks of social distancing. This is about months of social distancing.
Outside of Canada, hundreds of stranded Canadian travelers are waiting to see if the federal government will help repatriate them. The Prime Minister is working on a plan to get Canadians abroad out. But more and more countries are shutting down, so airspace and runways are diminishing. As David Akin reports, the Prime Minister admits not everyone will have a way home.
As more and more countries around the world close their airspace or shut down airports, the federal government in Canada is scrambling to do whatever it can to repatriate Canadians abroad who want to come home.
We're working with Canadian airlines to make commercial flights available for as many Canadians who are stranded as possible. We will also be working with other countries to ensure that our airlines have the permissions and other supports necessary to fly.
Air Canada, for example, landed a plane Saturday afternoon in Morocco and will take a plane load of Canadians from that North African country to Montreal on Sunday. Trudeau also said the government expects to secure flights with returning Canadians from Peru, despite Peru's decision to ban all flights in its airspace. Canada is also looking to get flights home from Spain, and other countries may follow. But Trudeau also had this warning.
Now, we won't be able to reach everyone, but we're going to do our best to help those we can.
The advice now for Canadians abroad: register with Global Affairs Canada. Keep your smartphone charged and be ready for a text, email, or phone call. And there was a special message for retired Canadians who spend their winters in the sunny south.
I would like to say a word to our beloved snowbirds. I want to remind them that they should return to Canada as soon as possible, especially as flights become increasingly scarce. And I want to reassure them that the border will always be open for them to return back home in Canada.
Meanwhile, the first move was made to restrict the travel of Canadians within Canada. The government of the Northwest Territories, shortly before announcing its first confirmed case, said it would block all non-essential travel into the territory, a move supported by Ottawa. Every province and regional health authority has the same power to do the same thing, to shut off borders or to put up barriers at a city limit, though the federal health minister resisted the idea of a broad-based, inside-the-country restriction.
It does not make sense from my perspective as a health minister to put an entire country on lockdown if, in fact, we don't have the need to do so from a science perspective. In fact, it could create even more harm.
But even though Haidu argued against tighter interprovincial or interregional travel restrictions, Haidu was adamant on this point time and again. Stay at home. Please keep your social distance and be prepared to do just that for weeks. Robin?
David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Global News has learned the House of Commons will reconvene Tuesday to deal with the COVID-19 crisis, but business will have to be conducted with the minimum number of MPs, possibly only those who are within driving distance of Ottawa. There's an acknowledgement that each party will try to keep its MPs from flying. The government is not ruling out more restrictions on travel if people refuse to heed that call to stay home. The number of infected here in Canada is rising quickly. More than 1,300 people have tested positive for COVID-19. 19 people have now died. There were big jumps reported today in the worst hit provinces. BC has the most, now at 424 cases. And as David mentioned, there is a first confirmed case in Canada's far north. Someone in Yellowknife tested positive after traveling to BC and Alberta. Canadians woke up to a new reality today. The world's longest undefended border is no longer open to most people. As of midnight, the land border between Canada and the U.S. closed to all non-essential travel. The move by the Canadian and American governments is meant to help curtail the spread of COVID-19. Our Jeff Semple was at normally one of the country's busiest crossings this morning. Jeff, a lot has changed.
Well, Robin, a Saturday during March break in Niagara Falls would normally be bustling with people and traffic, but take a look. It is an absolute ghost town here, almost completely deserted, and this is a big part of the reason why the Canadian-U.S. border officially closed to all non-essential traffic as of 12:01 this morning. But it seems not everyone got the message. Minutes before midnight, Canadians arrived at the U.S. border to find the way already shut.
They don't allow me. They said, no, sorry, sir.
This Toronto area couple was hoping to visit their children who live in the U.S., but were told to turn back.
They said, you see the news, everybody stay home, you stay home.
Others also learned the hard way that the border is now blocked.
Apparently we're not using it anymore.
This Canadian was forced to walk back from the U.S. across a freezing bridge after border guards wouldn't allow his wife to drive over and pick him up. The government says the border is now closed to tourists, shoppers, even asylum seekers. Canadians currently in the U.S. are still allowed to return home, and cross-border trade continues, albeit on a much smaller scale.
Well, the automotive industry is basically shut down until the end of the month. That's our largest employer.
The mayor of Windsor says 6,000 of his residents work in the U.S., many now confused as to whether they'll be allowed to cross for their commute.
I think we're going to have to test this a little bit and just to figure out what is essential and not essential.
This Canadian couple works in the U.S. She's a nurse and is still allowed south of the border, but he works for a production company and can no longer get across.
All over the States, we had set up for the next 6 months, and all that business is gone.
The last time this border was closed was after 9/11, and that closure only lasted a couple of days. The government says this time the border will be closed for at least 1 month, after which they'll reassess and decide whether to extend it. Robin?
All right, thanks for that, Jeff. Let's go to Jackson Proskow, who's watching the border situation from the American side tonight. Jackson, how is the U.S. handling the COVID-19 crisis when it comes to cross-border travel?
Robin, the U.S. has adopted the same measures on both its northern and southern borders, restricting all non-essential travel like tourism or shopping, but keeping the doors open to trade and those who need to work. That has led some Canadian snowbirds in Florida, Arizona, and California scrambling to get home, and it's raising concerns about how daily commerce will function in border cities where people are used to moving back and forth freely. In cities along the U.S.-Mexico border like El Paso, Texas, thousands of people travel back and forth to work or go shopping or even access medical services. And so the big unanswered question remains, what exactly counts as essential travel? The U.S. has said visa holders should still be able to enter for essential jobs like agriculture and medical workers. It's not clear if that applies to all categories of visas, and the U.S. has actually suspended issuing new visas at its consulates and embassies worldwide. All of this is to say that travelers may find the rules applied unevenly at border crossings in the short term as U.S. border protection officials struggle to understand and interpret these new rules. Robin?
Jackson Proskow in Washington. More than 80 million Americans are now under orders to stay home. Several U.S. states are hoping to stop the spread of COVID-19 by cracking down on public gatherings. More than 24,000 Americans have tested positive for the virus. At least 275 have died. Those numbers are expected to rise substantially in the coming days. As Jennifer Johnson explains, hospitals in New York and Washington state, two of the hardest hit areas in the U.S., are already running out of essential supplies.
As of Saturday evening, tens of millions of Americans ordered to shelter at home. as states desperately try to stop the spread of COVID-19. Illinois and New Jersey joining New York, California, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut in taking the drastic action. Others are expected to follow.
Every American has a role to play in defending our nation from this invisible, horrible enemy. So we say stay at home and save lives.
President Trump has declared New York with the highest number of cases a federal disaster area. Overrun hospitals are already running out of protective equipment.
We are literally scouring the globe looking for medical supplies. We've identified 2 million N95 masks, which are the high protection masks.
In Washington state, which has the highest death toll in America, health officials say they will soon have to make life and death decisions, rationing ventilators.
The notion that this could happen in America, where we can see something coming and we can't get the resources here to avert it, is ridiculous. It should not happen.
All non-essential businesses in these states will be closed, but places like gas stations and grocery stores will remain open. Officers are cracking down on those violating the orders.
We're meeting with businesses where they don't understand the verbal conversation. We're then going to serve them with a notice.
For the first time in history, the U.S. government has extended the federal tax deadline for 90 days, trying to ease the financial burden on Americans. Over 2 million Americans are expected to file for unemployment benefits by midweek as more workers are laid off, the largest weekly increase in history. Congress and White House negotiators are working through the weekend to hammer out a $1 to $2 trillion economic aid package.
Just got to tell the public the truth. We're going to be floating probably 70% of the nation's payroll.
California's governor is requesting $1 billion for his state alone and wants the U.S. naval hospital ship Mercy to dock in Los Angeles, fearing over 20% of Californians will need to be hospitalized. Desperate calls for help as the U.S. faces a pandemic and economic crisis like no other. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
In Quebec City, police have made their first coronavirus-related arrest. A woman who tested positive for the disease was arrested while being out for a walk in her neighborhood. It happened 6 days after the province declared its 10-day public health emergency. Under this measure, authorities are given broad powers if someone jeopardizes the health and safety of others. The woman is now in hospital and may face charges. We know you have lots of questions about this virus. Our Jeff Semple will continue to consult with experts and try to answer them. Email your questions at globalnews.ca. And on our website, you'll find a special page dedicated entirely to the new coronavirus. That's at globalnews.ca/coronavirus. Coming up, Italy imposes more restrictions on public life as hundreds more die. And the tributes pour in for country music star Kenny Rogers. Australia's Bondi Beach has been shut down temporarily. Officials were forced to close the beach after thousands of people flocked there in recent days, defying social distancing orders. Lifeguards will now conduct regular head counts, and they will shut down other beaches if too many people gather in one location. Australia recently imposed stricter socializing rules as part of its COVID-19 response. The country has more than 1,000 confirmed cases of the virus. 7 people have died. Sirens blared across Jordan's capital today, marking the start of the country's nationwide curfew. Jordan is limiting the movement of its 10 million citizens indefinitely to combat the spread of COVID-19. Anyone caught violating the curfew can be jailed for up to a year. So far, nearly 400 people have been arrested. Jordan has 85 confirmed cases of the virus. Iran's president held a cabinet meeting today to discuss additional measures to fight the spread of the new coronavirus. All attendees, except for President Hassan Rouhani, wore face masks. Iranians have been encouraged to stay home for the next 2 weeks and only leave if it is absolutely necessary. More than 20,000 people have tested positive for COVID-19 in that country. More than 1,500 people have died. The epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic is still in Europe. Italy is the hardest hit country in the world. 793 people died there in the past day alone. That pushes the death toll in Italy past 4,800. Spain now appears to be on a similar trajectory, and there are fears France, Germany, and the United Kingdom may not be far behind. Redmond Shannon reports.
Italy's armed forces are having to work harder every day, transporting bodies out of the worst affected regions as the rate of death continues to increase. The mayor of one city says the true numbers are even higher, with many untested people dying at home. The lockdowns are now even stricter, with bans on exercise outside. People are only allowed out for emergencies or to get food. In Spain, the crisis is just a few days behind Italy. This conference centre is being set up to treat the rapidly rising number of cases.
You're only allowed to leave your house if you're going to go get food or to the pharmacy, that kind of necessary supplies.
Albertan Zach Gerling is in Prague and fears he'll be stuck if his flight home gets cancelled.
It's like 20,000 Czech crown fine for not having a mask on, so it's pretty intense.
That's $1,000. In neighbouring Slovakia, this is how the new government was sworn into office Saturday. In France, the lockdown is not as stringent as Italy, but much of Paris is effectively closed for business. The country's health minister issued an open invitation for citizens to play their part by donating stored face masks to health workers. Germany too is preparing for the worst, and central London is almost empty of tourists. But many Londoners are still going about their business as normal, despite the new measures in effect.
British bars may be closed, but it is far from a full lockdown here. But looking at what's happened in the rest of Europe, the UK could be headed that way too.
With a strategy U-turn from the British government this week, the messaging on social distancing is not hitting home with everyone. The long-term or indeed short-term consequences of that may soon become apparent. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Still ahead, the loss of a legend. Kenny Rogers dead at 81.
You're watching Global National.
You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em.
Country music legend Kenny Rogers has died. His career spanned nearly 6 decades, and he topped the country and pop music charts 24 times. He grew up in the Houston projects and credits music for changing his life.
To see what condition my condition was in.
He first found success in the 1960s with his band The First Edition, but it was when he went solo in 1977 that he became a superstar with his breakthrough song, Lucille.
You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille.
Some of Rogers' biggest hits came in collaboration with longtime friends like Lionel Richie and Dolly Parton.
I loved Kenny with all my heart. My heart's broken, and a big old chunk of it has gone with him today.
Kenneth Rogers, everybody!
Parton was at Rogers' farewell concert in 2017. He ended his music career citing health challenges. Today, his family said he died peacefully at home from natural causes.
There'll be time enough to count when the deal is done.
Can't forget that song. The Rogers family is planning a small private service because of the coronavirus pandemic. They say they will celebrate his life publicly with his friends and fans at a later date. Up next, finding harmony in quarantine, the perfect pitch to help flatten the curve. For those of you singing the self-isolation blues, you're probably looking for ways to tune into communities. As Reggie Cicchini explains, sharing music has become a major key to connecting with others responsibly.
Once vibrant communities now sit quiet, patiently awaiting the return of ambient sounds. And as concerns over COVID-19 crescendo,
we're able to bring a little bit of light into people's days.
Music is being used as a form of therapy.
And if we can provide a little bit of entertainment to cheer them on and to keep everybody sort of occupied and in a good mood, then that's what we should do.
Well, let's talk about why we're here, first of all.
Some of the biggest names in the recording industry are turning self-isolation
Day 6
into something intimate and interactive.
Imagine there's no heaven.
Homes now feel more like cages.
So turn the lights down.
So many musicians are using the only means some people have to be social as a way to engage them in conversation.
Canada, Canada, Canada.
And distract them from chaos.
Canada, Canada. Heart, heart, heart.
It is really good to notice that there are some signs of, common humanity and hope that are showing up amid this crisis.
These socially distant performances, for a few minutes, allow everyone tuning in a chance to keep calm and sing along. But it's not just small screen performances getting big reviews. Kids playing for an elderly neighbor, keeping her distance.
It feels scary. I'm staying at home.
A quartet replacing the bandstand with a basement.
They're doing something that's of value to society.
The window has become a way to let the air in and the talent out. While balconies act as a one-person stage that turn into a chorus of quarantined townspeople.
I hope you feel comfortable with how far apart we are.
Even in the most difficult times, music acts as a universal medicine.
If you live just moment by moment and make the most of today, then you can get through it.
And helps bring the world a little bit closer, no matter how isolated we feel and how far apart we are. Reggie Cicchini, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Robin Gill. We're going to keep bringing you the latest COVID-19 news as it happens, but we also want to offer some lighter moments during this new reality. Here's a little Christmas spirit in spring. The trend Lights for Life is taking off across Canada as people decorate their homes to lift hopes. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.